An old man, tired from the wear and tear of life, sat alone in his small, quiet home. The ticking of the clock on the wall echoed in the silence. His heart felt heavy, longing for the warmth of family. It had been years since his two sons had moved away to different towns, each building lives of their own. The old man decided that it was time to visit them. With a heavy heart but a hopeful spirit, he packed a small bag, carefully folding an old photograph of his sons as children, his greatest treasure. First, he decided to visit his eldest son, the one who had always been driven, career-focused, and independent. The old man remembered the boy's eagerness to grow up and build a life of success. Now, as he neared his son's grand house, he smiled to himself, proud of the man his son had become. He knocked on the door, adjusting his coat, and waited with excitement. The door opened, and there stood his eldest son. His expression wasn't the warm one the old man had imagined, but the father brushed it off, assuming his son was simply tired from work. "Father, good to see you," the son said, though his tone lacked the joy the old man had hoped for. The son glanced inside before adding, "But please, don't sit on the couch. It's new and we don't want it to get dirty." The words cut through the old man's heart, but he smiled faintly, nodding in understanding. He had brought a gift, an old watch that once belonged to the son's grandfather, but the moment no longer felt right to offer it. The old man stood awkwardly by the door as his daughter-in-law passed by, giving him a brief nod, barely looking up from her phone. His grandchildren, busy with their own gadgets, didn't even acknowledge him. The warmth he longed for was nowhere to be found. At dinner, the old man was seated at a small table by himself, far from the family. The chatter from the main table felt distant, like he was listening to strangers instead of his own blood. His food was served cold, and no one asked him how he had been, how his health was, or even how he'd managed the long journey. He swallowed his food quietly, every bite harder than the last. By the time dinner ended, the old man felt like a ghost in the house, unseen and unheard. That night, lying alone in the guest room, he looked at the photograph of his sons and wondered where the years had gone. He had raised his children with love, giving them everything he could, and now he was a mere visitor in their lives. Early the next morning, he left without much of a goodbye. His eldest son barely noticed, caught up in his day's work, and the old man walked away, heartbroken. A week later, the old man gathered his courage once more. This time, he would visit his younger son, the one who had always been more easygoing, more connected to family. As the old man approached the modest home, he hesitated, hoping this visit would be different. His heart ached from the last experience, but he still held on to hope. Before he could knock, the door swung open, and his younger son stood there, a broad smile spreading across his face. "Father!" he exclaimed, pulling the old man into a warm embrace. "We've been waiting for you!" The old man's heart swelled. His daughter-in-law appeared at the door, smiling warmly, and took his coat. "Welcome, Father. Please make yourself at home," she said kindly. The grandchildren, full of life and joy, ran toward him, hugging him tightly and pulling him toward the dinner table. The old man was seated at the center of the table, surrounded by family, the smell of freshly prepared food filling the air. His son served him the best dishes, making sure his plate was full. Every moment was filled with laughter and warmth, with his son and grandchildren eager to hear his stories, his thoughts, his advice. It was a stark contrast to the cold reception he had felt just days before. As he sat there, surrounded by love, the old man's emotions became too much to bear. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he tried to hold them back, but they flowed freely down his weathered cheeks. "Father," his son said, noticing the tears, "are you not happy with us?" The old man wiped his eyes and smiled through his tears. "No, my son," he replied softly. "I'm just overwhelmed. because for the first time in a long while I feel like I'm truly home.